reminded that my nature is to serve out of a sense of obligation to a commitment, rather than doing so out of a sense of gratitude for the opportunity to serve. It takes a little bit of reality check for me to acknowledge this trait and get my priorities straight. For example, I've been leading a support group for survivors of prostate cancer, people that have issues with prostates, for 12 years now. And dozens of meetings. We meet every month. And sometimes I go, sometimes we just stare at each other because there's nothing that hasn't been said before. But often there is that person that shows up, as I showed up many years ago, and didn't have anyone to talk to about the situation. And that is my kick in the butt to remind me a little bit that we're there to serve the population. So that's an example for me. Obligations do have their place in the world, and don't get me wrong. We better be paying our bills and fulfilling secular contracts. We better eat properly to maintain our health, and we better be following accepted behaviors while out in the general population. There are many obligations we carry out just because it's the right thing to do. If we don't follow through with obligations, there's usually a negative consequence. Bad credit for poor financial choices, health issues for not eating properly, being separated from the general population if we don't follow laws or social mores. However, our lives as Christians, they require us to live out of a sense of gratitude for what God has provided for us. Living out of obligation is just too restricting. It narrows the path of salvation that God intends for us. The story of the 10 lepers in Luke is given to us by Jesus to understand the benefits of living with gratitude. And Paul's letter to Timothy explains why we are commanded to live such lives. Now, the Samaritan was a double outcast. He was rejected by the Jews because of who he was and what he had. Like the other lepers, he was shut out from family and society by virtue of his leprosy. This was in addition to a status of not being born a Jew, but of course a despised Samaritan. He had no real chance of living a life, just an existence, and a poor one at that. While his 9 companions had a glimmer of hope of being restored to family, society, and occupation, and more importantly, the temple, the Samaritan's hope was faint at best. I guess there were a bunch of skin conditions that were considered unclean, and eczema, psoriasis, whatever you may have. If it was nasty-looking skin, you were going to be banned for a while. And so, people were brought back in once they were clean, once that condition was cleaned up. They didn't know. But, the Samaritan, he wasn't going to have any of that. He was stuck. Now, the arrival of Jesus into this group makes for great theater. From their allocated distance, which was at least 40 paces, which I kind of stepped off from the front of the church to about the road. That's about how far a leper would have to be away from the general population. They were that far away, but they didn't say their usual cry, which was unclean, unclean, which was to have you stay away. You didn't want to go near them or you were going to be unclean. But they didn't say that when they saw Jesus. They said, Jesus, Master, have mercy on us. And Jesus does not disappoint. Like many of his healings, he merely speaks to cure and commands what at least 9 of them know what needs to be done next to be pronounced clean. That is, they had to get verification of a cure and purification rites from a priest. Now 9 of them immediately sets off to do so. That's what Jesus told them to do. Hurrying even faster as they see that they're being healed, they run even faster. They are not ungrateful to Jesus. They are ecstatic about getting their lives back. Imagine they're going to be able to join their families again, and maybe get a job, not be a leper. However, it turns out they were running in the wrong direction. All they were doing was really returning to their former lives and their obligations, and all they really had gained at this point was a change for better health. Now the Samaritan, he must have had at least the faith the size of a mustard seed. It must have been at least that big. Because when he stopped and thought about it, well, he turned right around and runs towards Jesus. And of course, his life is transformed way beyond the physical cure. He's not only made whole, but received salvation. Now, there were no Hallmark stores, or in my case, a dollar store, to buy greeting cards back in the day. But this is the kind of a card that the Samaritan could have chosen to express his gratitude. It says, it's addressed to God. But it says, finally a thank you note. Finally a thank you note that says how I really feel. And in there, you can see that there's just word after word of what we would associate with being thankful. I highlighted the first one, which is grateful, which I said, oh, this is a perfect card for this one. But bewildered, amazed, acknowledged, enraptured, peaceful, jazzed up, in seventh heaven, forever in your debt. So I'm going to pin that up on the door out there today with our card. So if you want to think of another word to put on there or highlight a word, you can do that. But, you know, if he could have got a card, that's how his celebration towards Jesus was. Now, Jesus, he would like to know what direction we head when we have received a blessing from God. Do we give ample thanks and praise, or do we pay lip service and then get on with our lives? We need to acknowledge that our relationship with our deity is based on faith, obedience, and gratitude. Our stewardship program this year is titled Living Generously. And for the next several weeks, you'll find an insert that connects with our lessons for the days to our daily lives. Today's writing is by Richard Felton, and he states that many times we experience miracles, small and large, and he asks about these miracles. He says, do we take the time to give thanks for them, or do we just go about our daily work? Do we even recognize God's grace and glory in our daily lives? Do we see God's abundance in our lives and simply think of what we have as a result of our own hard work? And he adds, when we choose to live generously, we choose first and foremost to be grateful. Grateful to God for what we have. Grateful to our families and friends for their love and support. Grateful to our faith communities for their acceptance and challenge. Gratitude opens our soul to a fuller life because it opens our mind to seeing all that we have been given. The lesson from 2 Timothy can be considered a fact-check expose. Our society has this insatiable desire to have all claims tested as factual. I used to be really bad at that. I thought, I can't be true, I'll look it up. And what I found out is, well, guess what? Unlike many of the gray areas that fact-checking institutes like Snopes struggles with, it's because they deal with secular issues. And they have, a lot of these times, these claims have no truth, might be half-truths, might be partial truths, might be mostly truths. But we have to agree, well, what do I believe now? I don't even know now. But Paul writes about the need to live fully into the gospel. He says, you know, this is the word of God, this is the truth. He derides the hair-splitting differences that are meant to muck up the clear message of the gospel. He says, wrangling over words which does no good, but only ruins those who are listening. We have our baptismal covenant as the son of our faith at this church. And Paul writes a bit from a baptismal hymn common to him to illustrate the reason why we are commanded to live our spiritual lives as charged. Once again, Paul writes, if we have died with him, so we also live with him. If we endure, we will also reign with him. If we deny him, he will also deny us. If we are faithless, he remains faithful, for he cannot deny himself. In other words, we are challenged by this text to be faithful to the gospel we have received. To do otherwise is to contradict Christ and be less of a Christian than what we are to be. Christ chose an outcast to be saved in order for us to do likewise. We are commanded to respond to the outcast of our times. After all, most lepers now are healed with antibiotics. They don't have to live in colonies. The antibiotics were called miracle drugs, too, back in the day. Fine, good. A miracle. Now, the outcasts we did encounter today, or their advocates, are more likely not to stand out there and cry, unclean, unclean. They're probably going to come up and get in our face with what their issues are. Those people include the homeless, refugees, illegal aliens, LGBT community members. And that may seem like lepers to some, but Christ expects us to love and serve them as any other neighbor, and to do it with a sense of gratitude for being able to serve. Indeed, we are directed by Paul to be faithful to the gospel we have received. The church can lose sight of the center of where the word and the work should be focused. And when it does, we need to reduce the Christian message to the barest essentials of Christ, who is proclaimed, known, and received through the gospel.